Hi, my friends. Today I want to present you a new story. Enjoy watching it.
It was the kind of day that started with a dull gray sky, a fitting backdrop for the somber occasion that awaited. The house had been unnervingly quiet since dawn, as if it too was mourning the absence that now hung heavy in every corner. Lynn Jenkins, a woman whose once vibrant spirit had dimmed, sat by the window, staring blankly at the world outside. The bustling city life beyond the glass felt like a cruel reminder that time moved on, indifferent to her grief. Her heart ached with an unbearable emptiness, a hollow that no amount of tears could fill. It had been 2 weeks since the accident, but the pain was as fresh as if it had just happened. Alice, her only daughter, and John, her beloved son-in-law, were gone, ripped from the world in a violent twist of fate. The loss was a weight that Lynn wasn't sure she could bear, but she had no choice. There was Melina to think about now, her 8-year-old granddaughter, who had also lost everything in that one devastating night. The first few days after the accident were a blur. People came and went, offering their condolences, bringing casseroles she couldn't eat, flowers she couldn't stand to look at. They all said the same thing: if there's anything you need, just let us know. But there was nothing anyone could do to bring Alice and John back, and that was all Lynn needed. But today was different. Today, Lynn had to pull herself together, because today was the reading of the will. The thought of it made her stomach churn, but she knew it had to be done. Alice and John had been responsible people. They had made arrangements for everything, including who would take care of Melina if something ever happened to them. But knowing that didn't make it any easier. "Mom." A soft voice broke through Lynn's reverie. She turned to see Melina standing in the doorway, her small frame dwarfed by the oversized sweater she was wearing, Alice's sweater. Lynn's heart twisted at the sight, but she forced a smile. "Yes, sweetheart." "Do we have to go?" Melina asked, her eyes wide with fear. "I don't want to hear what they have to say. I just want Mom and Dad back." Lynn swallowed hard, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill over. She walked over to Melina and knelt down to her level, taking her hands in her own. "I know, sweetie. I want that too. But we have to go. It's what your mom and dad wanted, and we need to honor their wishes. But I'll be with you the whole time, okay? You're not alone." Melina nodded, though her eyes remained downcast. Lynn gently brushed a strand of hair behind her ear and kissed her forehead. "We'll get through this together," she whispered, more to reassure herself than Melina. The ride to the lawyer's office was quiet, the silence only broken by the occasional sniffle from Melina. Lynn gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white. She couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled in the pit of her stomach. Something felt off, but she couldn't put her finger on it. When they arrived, they were greeted by Mr. Thompson, Alice and John's lawyer, a tall man with a kind face, but an air of somber professionalism. "Mrs. Jenkins, Melina," he said, nodding in acknowledgement. "I'm so sorry for your loss. Please come in." The room where the will was to be read was small and cold, the kind of room that made you feel claustrophobic, even though there was plenty of space. Lynn and Melina sat down, their hands still clasped together. Mr. Thompson took his seat across from them and began to shuffle through some papers. "I know this is a difficult time," he began, his voice gentle but firm. "But I want to assure you that Alice and John took great care in planning for Melina's future. They loved her very much, and wanted to make sure she would always be taken care of." Lynn nodded, her throat tight with emotion. She knew Alice and John had always been meticulous, planning everything down to the smallest detail, but knowing that didn't make this moment any less painful. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat and began to read the will. It was all standard. Some money set aside for Melina's education, the house left to Lynn. But then he got to the part Lynn had been dreading. "Custody of Melina Jenkins is to be granted to..." Mr. Thompson hesitated, his eyes flickering over the document, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was reading. "To James Langston." Lynn's heart stopped. "What did you say?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Mr. Thompson looked up, his expression one of shock and confusion. It says here that James Langston, John's younger brother, is to be granted custody of Melina. No, Lynn said, shaking her head as if she could somehow erase what she had just heard. How could Alice and John have named him as Melina's guardian? I'm not sure, Mr. Thompson said, frowning as he reviewed the document again. But this is definitely their will. It's all in order, signed and notarized. Mom. Melina's voice was small and scared. Lynn looked at her, and the sight of the fear in her granddaughter's eyes snapped her back to reality. She couldn't let this happen. She wouldn't. There has to be some kind of mistake, Lynn said, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and anger. James Langston is not fit to take care of Melina. I won't let him take her. Mr. Thompson looked troubled. Mrs. Jenkins, I understand how you feel, but this is a legal document. Unless it can be proven that James Langston is unfit or that there was some kind of fraud involved, there isn't much we can do. Lynn's mind raced. She had to find a way to stop this. She had to protect Melina. But how? As if reading her thoughts, Mr. Thompson added, you could contest the will in court. It would be a difficult process, and there's no guarantee you would win, but it's an option. I'll do it, Lynn said without hesitation. I'll fight this. I'm not going to let that man take my granddaughter. Mr. Thompson nodded. I'll start the paperwork, but I have to warn you, this could get messy. I don't care, Lynn replied, her voice steely. I'll do whatever it takes. As they left the office, Lynn could feel the weight of the battle ahead pressing down on her, but there was also a new resolve building inside her. She had lost Alice and John, but she wasn't going to lose Melina too. She would fight with everything she had to keep her granddaughter safe. But as they drove home, Lynn couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something else was at play here. Why would Alice and John name James as Melina's guardian? It didn't make sense. Unless James had somehow manipulated them, coerced them into making this decision. The thought sent a chill down Lynn's spine. If James was willing to go to such lengths to take Melina away, what else was he capable of? And what did he really want? Lynn glanced at Melina, who was staring out the window, lost in her own thoughts. She squeezed her granddaughter's hand, trying to offer some comfort, but inside, she was terrified. The fight had only just begun, and Lynn knew that it was going to be the hardest battle of her life. But she also knew that she couldn't give up, not when Melina's future was at stake. And as they pulled into the driveway, Lynn made a silent vow. She would uncover the truth, no matter what it took. She would protect Melina from whatever dark forces were trying to tear their family apart. Because in the end, Lynn knew that love was stronger than any lie, stronger than any scheme. Lynn spent the next few days in a haze, replaying the moment when Mr. Thompson read the will over and over in her mind. The shock of hearing James Langston's name as Melina's guardian gnawed at her every waking hour. She knew she had to act fast if she wanted any chance of keeping Melina. Early one morning, Lynn decided to visit an old friend who might have some insight into this situation. She called Emma Wilkins, a retired attorney and someone who had known Alice and John well. Emma agreed to meet her at a small cafe downtown. As Lynn entered the cafe, she spotted Emma sitting by the window. The two women exchanged warm hugs before sitting down. Lynn, you look like you've been through the ringer, Emma said, concern etched on her face. I feel like I have, Lynn replied, sighing heavily. I need your help, Emma. Something doesn't add up about Alice and John's will. Why on earth would they name James as Melina's guardian? Emma frowned. That does seem strange. I remember Alice telling me how she wanted you to raise Melina if anything ever happened to them. She never mentioned James. Lynn's heart ached at the thought. That's exactly what I thought. But Mr. Thompson insists the will is legitimate. Emma leaned in closer. Let me look into this for you, Lynn. There might be more to this than we know. As they parted, Lynn felt a flicker of hope. Emma was sharp and resourceful. If anyone could uncover the truth, it was her. Later that evening, Lynn received a call from Emma. "Lynn, I found something that might interest you," Emma said without preamble. "What is it?" Lynn asked, gripping the phone tightly. "There's a record of James visiting John's office about a month before the accident. It was a closed-door meeting." Lynn's pulse quickened. "What do you think it means?" "I'm not sure, but it's worth looking into. Something about this whole situation feels off," Emma replied. "Thank you, Emma. I don't know what I'd do without you," Lynn said, her voice trembling with gratitude. "I'm here for you, Lynn. We'll get to the bottom of this," Emma assured her. The next morning, Lynn decided to confront James directly. She knew it would be a difficult conversation, but she had no choice. She needed answers. James lived in a small, upscale apartment on the other side of town. When she arrived at James' apartment, she hesitated before knocking on the door. After a moment, the door swung open. "Lynn," he said with a smirk, "to what do I owe this unexpected visit?" Lynn straightened her spine and looked him square in the eye. "I want to know why Alice and John named you as Melina's guardian. What did you say to them?" James raised an eyebrow. "I didn't say anything to them. They must have had their reasons. Don't play games with me, James. I know you met with John before the accident. What did you talk about?" James' expression darkened. "That's none of your business, Lynn." "It is my business when it involves my granddaughter," Lynn shot back, her voice rising. James leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms. "Maybe they realized you're too old to take care of Melina. Maybe they saw that she'd be better off with someone younger, someone who could give her a better life." Lynn's blood boiled. "You have no right to speak about what's best for Melina." James shrugged nonchalantly. "We'll see what the court has to say about that." Lynn turned and walked away, her mind racing. James was hiding something. She could feel it. But what could it be? Back home, Lynn couldn't shake the feeling that James was up to no good. She began digging through old files, letters, anything that might give her a clue. Hours later, she found a letter from John addressed to Alice, written a few weeks before the accident. The letter was brief, but it mentioned something about settling old debts and making sure Melina was taken care of. Lynn's hands trembled as she read the words. Was it possible that James had manipulated John into naming him as Melina's guardian? Determined to get to the bottom of this, Lynn decided to visit John's office the next day. She knew it was a long shot, but maybe someone there could shed light on his meeting with James. The following morning, Lynn arrived at the office building where John had worked. She asked to speak with his former assistant, a young woman named Claire. Claire led Lynn to a small conference room. "I'm so sorry about what happened, Mrs. Jenkins," Claire said softly. "John was a wonderful man." "Thank you, Claire," Lynn replied. "I need to ask you about something. Did you happen to overhear anything when James Langston visited John?" Claire hesitated, glancing around as if unsure whether to speak. "I didn't hear much, but I did catch a bit of their conversation. Mr. Langston was talking about some kind of deal, something John owed him. It didn't sound like a friendly chat." Lynn's heart pounded. "Did John seem worried?" Claire nodded. "Yes, he did. He looked really tense afterward, like something was waiting on him." Lynn thanked Claire and left the office, her mind swirling with possibilities. What kind of deal had John made with James, and how did it lead to him being named as Melina's guardian? As she drove home, Lynn couldn't shake the feeling that the truth was just out of reach, like a shadow she couldn't quite catch. But she was more determined than ever to uncover the secrets that James was hiding. The tension in Lynn's home was palpable as she pieced together the fragments of information she'd gathered over the past few days. The unease gnawed at her, a persistent reminder that something sinister was at play. The more she uncovered, the clearer it became that James Langston was not just an obstacle, but a deliberate threat. Lynn knew she needed to move swiftly, but she felt like she was playing a game without all the rules. That evening, as Lynn sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by papers and letters, a sudden knock at the door startled her. She wasn't expecting anyone, and her heart skipped a beat. She walked cautiously to the door and peered through the peephole. To her surprise, it was Emma Wilkins, her old friend and retired attorney. She opened the door and was immediately met with Emma's worried expression. "Emma, what brings you here so late?" Lynn asked, stepping aside to let her in. Emma hurried inside, clutching a folder tightly in her hand. "Lynn, I found something. Something you need to see." They both sat at the table, and Emma placed the folder in front of Lynn, her hands trembling slightly. Lynn opened it, revealing documents that looked official, though she couldn't yet make sense of them. "What is this?" Lynn asked, flipping through the pages. "It's a background check on James Langston," Emma explained, her voice low and serious. "I had a bad feeling about him, so I did some digging. There's a lot more to him than meets the eye." Lynn's eyes scanned the documents, her breath catching as she read about James's past. A trail of debts, failed business ventures, and even a few run-ins with the law. But what shocked her most was a connection to an offshore account, one that seemed to have been recently accessed. "He's been funneling money," Lynn whispered, more to herself than to Emma. Emma nodded, "And that's not all. It seems James had connections to some very unsavory characters, including a loan shark who's been looking for him. I think he's in deep trouble and is using Melina to secure his financial future." Lynn felt a cold chill run down her spine. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture they painted was far worse than she had imagined. "We need to expose this," Lynn said, her voice filled with resolve. "He can't be allowed to take Melina." Emma agreed, "But we have to be careful. If James gets wind of what we're doing, he might disappear with her." The two women spent the next few hours strategizing, laying out a plan to gather more evidence and find a way to bring James down without tipping him off. They knew they had to act fast, as the court date was approaching. The following morning, Lynn decided to pay a visit to another person from her past, Detective Samuel Grayson, an old friend of her late husband Colin. Samuel had been a reliable ally during Colin's lifetime and had even helped Lynn a few times over the years. If anyone could help her navigate this situation, it would be him. Lynn made her way to the police station, feeling a mix of anxiety and determination. Samuel was sitting at his desk when she arrived, and his face lit up with a warm smile as he saw her. "Lynn Jenkins, it's been too long," Samuel greeted her, standing up to embrace her. "It certainly has, Sam," Lynn replied, smiling despite the turmoil brewing inside her. "But I'm afraid I'm here on business, not just a friendly visit." Samuel's expression turned serious as he motioned for her to sit down. "What's going on, Lynn?" Lynn explained everything, her suspicions about James, the mysterious meeting between him and John, the offshore accounts, and the dangerous connections Emma had uncovered. Samuel listened intently, his brow furrowing deeper with each detail. When she finished, Samuel leaned back in his chair, deep in thought. "This is serious, Lynn. If what you're saying is true, James could be involved in something far bigger than just a custody battle." "That's what I'm afraid of," Lynn admitted, her voice shaky. "But I don't know what to do next. I need to protect Melina." Samuel nodded. "Leave this with me. I'll see what I can dig up on my end. In the meantime, keep a low profile. Don't let James know you're onto him." Lynn felt a wave of relief wash over her. With Samuel on her side, she felt a glimmer of hope. As she was leaving the station, Samuel stopped her. "And Lynn, be careful. If James is as desperate as he seems, he might do something drastic." Lynn thanked him and left, the weight of Samuel's warning heavy on her shoulders. Over the next few days, Lynn and Emma worked tirelessly to gather more evidence. They enlisted the help of a private investigator, a man named Richard Cole, who had a reputation for being discreet and thorough. Richard began tracking James's movements, trying to uncover what he was planning. One evening, Lynn received a call from Richard. "Mrs. Jenkins, I found something you'll want to see. Meet me at the old factory on 12th Street in an hour." Lynn's heart raced as she hung up the phone. The old factory was a derelict building, abandoned for years, and the thought of meeting there filled her with dread. But she knew this could be the break they needed. Lynn arrived at the factory just as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the broken windows and rusted walls. Richard was waiting for her at the entrance, his expression serious. "What did you find?" Lynn asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Richard handed her a small USB drive. "It's all on there. Bank statements, emails, even a few recorded phone calls. James is planning something big, something that could put Melina in serious danger." Lynn's hands shook as she took the drive. "What do we do now?" "We need to go public with this," Richard said firmly. "Expose him before he has a chance to disappear. But you'll need to be careful, Mrs. Jenkins. If he finds out what we have, there's no telling what he might do." Lynn nodded, her mind racing with the implications of Richard's words. She had to protect Melina at all costs. As they parted ways, Lynn felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had the evidence she needed, and now it was time to take action. But she knew the road ahead would be treacherous, and the enemy she faced was more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Back at home, Lynn plugged the USB drive into her computer, her breath catching as she saw the files Richard had gathered. She knew she had to get this information to Samuel and Emma immediately. But as she reached for her phone, she heard a noise outside, footsteps on the gravel driveway. Her heart pounded as she looked out the window. In the dim light, she saw a figure moving towards the house. Panic seized her. Was it James? Had he found out about her investigation? She quickly turned off the lights and crouched down, hoping to remain unseen. The footsteps grew louder, and she could hear the creak of the front porch as the figure approached the door. Lynn held her breath, her mind racing with fear. But just as she thought the door would burst open, the footsteps stopped. There was a moment of silence, followed by the sound of retreating steps. Lynn waited until the figure was out of sight before she exhaled, her body trembling with adrenaline. She knew now that the enemy was closer than she had thought, and she couldn't afford to make any mistakes. With the evidence in hand, Lynn prepared to wage the most important battle of her life, one that would determine the fate of her beloved granddaughter, Melina. The morning sun streamed through the curtains as Lynn Jenkins sat at her kitchen table, her mind racing. The events of the previous night replayed in her head like a broken record. The figure outside her home, the USB drive containing incriminating evidence against James Langston, and the unsettling realization that the enemy was closer than she had ever imagined. She had hardly slept, her thoughts consumed by fear for Melina and the battle that lay ahead. Lynn's phone buzzed on the table, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was Emma. "Lynn, are you okay?" Emma's voice was laced with concern. "I'm fine," Lynn lied, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her. "But something happened last night. Someone was outside the house. I think they were watching me." "Did you get a look at them?" Emma asked, her tone now serious. "No," Lynn admitted, "but I have a feeling it was James or someone working for him. I have to get this evidence to Samuel today. We can't wait any longer." Emma agreed. "Meet me at the courthouse in an hour. We'll go to Samuel together." As Lynn ended the call, she couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled in her chest. She knew that today would be a turning point. One way or another, the truth would come out. An hour later, Lynn arrived at the courthouse, the USB drive clutched tightly in her hand. Emma was already waiting for her on the steps, her expression a mix of determination and anxiety. "Are you ready for this?" Emma asked as Lynn approached. Lynn nodded, though her heart pounded in her chest. "I don't think we have a choice." Together, They walked into the courthouse, the sound of their footsteps echoing off the marble floors. The building was quiet, a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing inside Lynn. They made their way to Samuel's office, and as they approached the door, it suddenly swung open. Samuel stood there, his usually calm demeanor replaced by a look of urgency. "Lynn, Emma, get in here. We've got a problem." They hurried inside, and Samuel closed the door behind them. His desk was covered in files and papers, and his computer screen displayed a series of financial records. "What's going on?" Lynn asked, her anxiety mounting. Samuel took a deep breath. "I've been digging into James's activities, just like we discussed. But this morning, I found something I didn't expect. It seems James isn't working alone." Lynn felt her blood run cold. "What do you mean?" Samuel gestured to the computer screen. "There's been a series of transactions between James and someone else, a name that's been kept under wraps until now, but I finally managed to trace it back to the source." He clicked a few keys, and a name appeared on the screen: Colin Jenkins. Lynn's heart nearly stopped. "That's impossible," she whispered, her mind reeling. "Colin's dead. He died in car accident." Samuel shook his head. "I thought so too, but this transaction was made just last week, and the account it was sent from belongs to someone using Colin's identity." Emma gasped. "Are you saying Colin might still be alive?" Lynn felt as though the ground had been ripped out from under her. Could it be possible? Could her late husband, the man she had mourned for years, still be alive, and worse, involved in this scheme to take Melina away from her? "We need to consider the possibility," Samuel said gently. "It could be someone else using his name, but given the circumstances, we can't rule anything out." Lynn's mind raced as she tried to process the information. But why? Why would Colin do this? Samuel's expression was grim. If it is Lynn's mind raced as she tried to process the information. But why? Why would Colin do this? Samuel's expression was grim. If it is Colin, he might be desperate. Maybe he's in some kind of trouble and needs money. Or maybe he's being blackmailed. We won't know until we find him. Lynn's emotions were a whirlwind of confusion, anger, and betrayal. The thought that Colin might still be alive filled her with a strange mixture of hope and dread. She had loved him deeply, and the pain of losing him had nearly broken her. But now, the possibility that he had faked his death, that he might be working against her, against Melina, was almost too much to bear. Emma placed a reassuring hand on Lynn's shoulder. "We'll get to the bottom of this, Lynn. Whatever the truth is, we'll find it." Lynn nodded, though her mind was still in turmoil. "We need to find out who's behind this, whether it's Colin or someone else." Samuel agreed. "I'll start by tracing these transactions further. In the meantime, you need to stay alert. If Colin is involved, he may try to contact you, or worse, he might already know you're onto him." Lynn's heart ached at the thought. If Colin was alive, why hadn't he come to her? Why hadn't he reached out? As they left Samuel's office, Lynn's phone buzzed again. She glanced at the screen, expecting another call from Emma or Samuel, but her heart skipped a beat when she saw the caller ID, unknown number. With trembling hands, she answered the call. "Hello." There was a moment of silence on the other end, followed by a familiar voice that sent shivers down her spine. "Lynn, it's me." Lynn's breath caught in her throat. She knew that voice. It was Colin. "Colin," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Is it really you?" There was another pause, and then the voice spoke again, softer this time. "I'm sorry, Lynn. I didn't want to involve you in this, but I had no choice." Lynn's mind spun with 1,000 questions, but she forced herself to focus. "What's going on, Colin? Why are you doing this? Why did you let everyone think you were dead?" Colin's voice was filled with regret. "I'll explain everything, but not over the phone. Meet me at the old cabin in the woods, the one we used to go to with the kids. I'll be there at dusk." Lynn hesitated, her heart pounding. The cabin held many memories, both good and bad, But now, it seemed like a place of shadows and secrets. Why should I trust you? Lynn asked, her voice stronger now. How do I know this isn't some kind of trap? Colin's sigh was heavy with emotion. You don't have to trust me, Lynn, but I swear, I never meant to hurt you. I just need you to hear me out. Please. Lynn's mind raced. She had spent years grieving for this man, and now, here he was, alive and asking for her help. Despite everything, a part of her wanted to believe him, to hear his side of the story. All right, Lynn finally said, her voice steady. I'll be there. The line went dead, and Lynn stared at her phone, her heart pounding in her chest. She felt Emma's concerned gaze on her. What did he say? Emma asked quietly. Lynn looked up, her eyes filled with determination. He wants to meet, tonight, at the old cabin. Emma's expression darkened with concern. Lynn, are you sure that's a good idea? It could be dangerous. I have to go, Emma, Lynn said firmly. If Colin is involved in this, I need to know why. I need answers. Emma nodded reluctantly. Then I'm coming with you. We'll face this together. As dusk approached, Lynn and Emma drove to the cabin, the tension between them thick. The once familiar road felt eerie, the trees looming like silent sentinels. When they arrived, the cabin was dark, a silhouette against the fading light. Lynn's heart pounded as they approached the door. Emma stayed close, her eyes scanning the surroundings for any sign of danger. Lynn took a deep breath and pushed the door open. Inside, the cabin was dimly lit by a single lantern, casting long shadows across the walls, and there, standing in the center of the room, was Colin Jenkins, older, wearier, but undeniably alive. Lynn, Colin said softly, his voice filled with a mix of sorrow and relief. Lynn stared at him, her emotions a turbulent mix of anger, confusion, and a flicker of the love she had once felt. Colin, she whispered, her voice shaking. How could you? Colin's shoulders sagged as he took a step toward her. I never wanted this, Lynn. I had to disappear. They were going to kill me. I thought it was the only way to protect you and the kids. Protect us. Lynn's voice was filled with bitterness. You left us to fend for ourselves. You left Melina without parents. How could you justify that? Colin's eyes filled with tears. I know I failed you, but I've been trying to fix it ever since. The people I was involved with, James Langston and his associates, they were dangerous, they still are, but I thought I could bring them down from the inside. Emma stepped forward, her voice stern. And what about Melina? Why are you letting James take her? Colin shook his head, anguish in his eyes. I never wanted it to come to this, Lynn. I thought I was protecting you and Melina by staying away, by making everyone believe I was dead, but all I did was make things worse. Lynn stood there, her heart torn between anger and sorrow. The man in front of her was a shadow of the Colin she had once known, the man she had mourned, grieved, and somehow moved on from. But here he was, flesh and blood, standing before her with a confession that shattered what little piece she had managed to piece together. You thought abandoning us was protecting us. Lynn's voice trembled with the weight of all the years she had spent alone, raising Melina, struggling through her grief. Do you have any idea what we went through? What I went through? Colin's eyes filled with tears, his voice thick with regret. I know I hurt you, Lynn. I know I left you to carry everything on your own, but I was scared. James had his claws in deep, and I couldn't see a way out that didn't end with you and Melina getting hurt. Lynn's mind whirled, trying to reconcile the man who had left her with the man standing before her now. So, you chose to disappear, to let me believe you were dead. And for what? To run away from your problems. Colin dropped his gaze, unable to meet her eyes. At first, yes, but it wasn't just that. James made me an offer, money, security, if I helped him. But when I realized what he was planning, I couldn't go through with it. I couldn't let him take Melina from you. So you stayed in the shadows, feeding him just enough to keep him satisfied, while watching us suffer. Lynn's voice was laced with bitterness. Do you have any idea how much pain you caused? Colin finally looked up, his face etched with guilt. Every day, Lynn, every single day. I was too much of a coward to come back, too scared to face what I'd done. But when I heard about the custody case, I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let James win. Not this time. Lynn took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She had so many questions, so much anger boiling inside her. But she also knew that standing here, in the midst of this revelation, wasn't going to solve anything. Why now, Colin? Why come back now, after all this time? Because I couldn't live with myself any longer, Colin admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I've made so many mistakes, but this, losing Melina, it would destroy you. And I couldn't bear that, Lynn. I couldn't let you suffer any more because of me. Lynn's shoulders slumped, the weight of the past few weeks pressing down on her. She had fought so hard, endured so much, and now, with Colin's return, everything had changed. What do you expect me to do with this, Colin? How am I supposed to trust you again? I don't expect you to trust me, Colin said, his voice filled with sorrow. I just want to help, to make things right. If I can do anything, anything at all, to protect Melina and make sure she stays with you, then that's what I'm going to do. Lynn stared at him, searching for any trace of the man she had once loved. She found fragments, pieces of a past that had been shattered by lies and fear. We're not the same people we were, Colin. Too much has happened. But Melina, she deserves a chance. And if you're really here to help, then I'll let you. But don't think for a second that it changes what you did. Colin nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. I know, Lynn. I know I have a lot to make up for, and I'll do whatever it takes to help you win this case. Lynn exhaled slowly, trying to process everything. Then we focus on the case. We focus on keeping Melina safe. But after that, we'll see. Colin's eyes softened, a glimmer of hope shining through his regret. Thank you, Lynn. That's more than I deserve. Lynn turned away, her emotions a chaotic swirl of anger, sorrow, and an inkling of something she couldn't yet define. She knew that their battle with James was far from over, but with Colin's return and the truth finally out in the open, they had a chance, a real chance, to protect Melina and expose James for who he really was. As she walked back into the house, Lynn knew that the coming days would be some of the hardest she had ever faced, but she also knew that she wouldn't face them alone. For better or worse, Colin was back, and together, they would make their final stand. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as Lynn Jenkins walked in, her steps steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside her. The sight of the judge's bench, the rows of seats filled with unfamiliar faces, and the looming figure of James Langston at the opposing table sent a chill down her spine. But Lynn knew she had no choice. Today was the day she would fight for Melina with every ounce of strength she had left. As Lynn took her seat beside her attorney, Samuel, she glanced over at James. His smug expression infuriated her. He was so sure of himself, so certain that his web of lies and deceit would win out. But Lynn knew something he didn't. She knew that the truth had a way of coming to light, and today, she would make sure it did. The judge entered the room, and everyone rose to their feet. Lynn's heart pounded in her chest as the proceedings began. The air was thick with anticipation, and she could feel the eyes of the spectators boring into her, waiting to see if the elderly grandmother could really take on someone as powerful as James Langston. The opening statements were brief, with James's lawyer painting him as a concerned family friend who only wanted what was best for Melina. Lynn clenched her fists under the table, resisting the urge to shout out the truth. She knew her moment would come soon enough. Samuel stood, his calm and measured voice filling the room. Your Honor, we are here today to prove that my client, Lynn Jenkins, is not only fully capable of caring for her granddaughter, but that the efforts to remove Melina from her custody have been driven by a malicious agenda. We have evidence that will demonstrate this clearly. The judge nodded, his expression unreadable. Proceed, Mr. Hastings. Samuel called his first witness, a social worker who had visited Lynn's home several times. The woman testified to the warmth and care Lynn provided for Melina, describing how the young girl was thriving despite the tragedy that had befallen her family. James's lawyer attempted to discredit the social worker, but her testimony was steadfast and unwavering. Next, Samuel presented the financial records, those that Lynn and Emma had uncovered, and those that Colin had revealed. The transactions between James and the mysterious figure, who turned out to be Colin, were displayed on the courtroom's screens. The room fell into a hushed silence as the evidence of James's corruption and manipulation was laid bare. Lynn watched as the judge's eyes narrowed, his focus intensifying as Samuel connected the dots. Your Honor, these records show that Mr. Langston has been funneling money to a man presumed dead, Colin Jenkins. This money was meant to ensure that Melina would be taken from her grandmother and placed into a situation where Mr. Langston could control her upbringing for his own financial gain. James's lawyer jumped to his feet. Objection. This is pure speculation. Samuel didn't miss a beat. I'll let the evidence speak for itself, Your Honor. The judge held up a hand, silencing the room. Overruled. I want to hear more. Samuel then called Colin Jenkins to the stand. Lynn's heart clenched as her husband, her thought-to-be-dead husband, walked slowly to the witness box. His face was lined with regret, his eyes downcast as he took the oath. Mr. Jenkins, Samuel began, his voice gentle but firm, please tell the court how you came to be involved with Mr. Langston. Colin hesitated, his gaze flickering to Lynn before settling on the judge. I made a terrible mistake. Years ago, I got involved with some bad people, James Langston being one of them. When the situation got too dangerous, I faked my death to protect my family. I thought I could escape, but they found me. James offered me a deal, money, safety, but only if I helped him take Melina from Lynn. I was desperate and scared. I didn't see any other way out. Lynn felt tears welling up in her eyes, but she fought them back. She had to stay strong. For Melina. The courtroom buzzed with whispers as Colin continued, his voice cracking with emotion. But I couldn't go through with it. Not after seeing what it was doing to Lynn and Melina. I'm here now to set things right, even if it means I'll never see my family again. James's lawyer looked ready to explode, but he knew better than to interrupt. The judge leaned forward, his gaze sharp. Mr. Jenkins, are you admitting to colluding with Mr. Langston in a scheme to undermine the welfare of your granddaughter? Colin nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. Yes, Your Honor, and I'm deeply sorry for everything I've done. Lynn's heart broke all over again, but she couldn't let herself be distracted. There was still more to do, more to say. Samuel stepped back from the witness stand. No further questions, Your Honor. The judge turned his gaze to James, who had gone pale. Mr. Langston, do you have anything to say in your defense? James stood, his expression a mixture of anger and desperation. This is a setup. Jenkins is lying to save himself. I only ever wanted to help that little girl, to give her a better life than an old woman like Lynn could provide. The judge silenced him with a stern look. That will be enough, Mr. Langston. I've heard enough to make a ruling. Lynn held her breath, her hands gripping the edge of the table so tightly her knuckles turned white. The judge looked around the courtroom, his expression grave. It is clear to this court that Mr. Langston has been involved in actions that are not only unethical but illegal. The evidence presented today has shown that his intentions toward Melina Jenkins were driven by greed and self-interest, not by concern for her welfare. He turned to Lynn, his gaze softening. "Mrs. Jenkins, you have shown incredible strength and resilience in the face of overwhelming adversity. Your love and dedication to your granddaughter are undeniable. Therefore, I am ruling in your favor. Custody of Melina Jenkins will remain with you." The relief that washed over Lynn was overwhelming. She felt Emma squeeze her hand, and she finally allowed herself to breathe. They had won. They had saved Melina. But the judge wasn't finished. "As for Mr. Langston, this court will be referring your actions to the district attorney's office for further investigation. You will be held accountable for your crimes." James's face contorted with rage, but he said nothing as he was led out of the courtroom by a pair of stern-looking officers. Lynn watched him go, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and pity. He had brought this on himself. As the courtroom emptied, Lynn turned to Colin, who was still sitting in the witness box, looking utterly defeated. "Colin," she said softly, her voice trembling with 1,000 unsaid words. He looked up at her, his eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, Lynn, for everything." Lynn walked over to him, her heart heavy with the weight of the past. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Colin, but I do know that I have to move forward, for Melina's sake." Colin nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I understand. I just wanted you to know the truth. I wanted you to know that I never stopped loving you." Lynn felt a tear slip down her cheek, but she wiped it away quickly. "It's too late for us, Colin, but maybe, one day, we can find peace." As she turned to leave, Emma came up beside her, wrapping her arm around Lynn's shoulders. "You did it, Lynn. You saved her." Lynn nodded, the reality of what had just happened finally sinking in. "We did it, Emma. Together." As they walked out of the courthouse, the weight of the past weeks began to lift from Lynn's shoulders. There would still be challenges ahead, healing, rebuilding, and helping Melina through the trauma of everything she had endured. But for the first time in a long time, Lynn felt hope. Because for Melina, she would do anything.